Hello everyone and welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. It is Hayden here, and today back with a deck tech off the back of the top 4 at Australian Nationals this past weekend with none other than Dromai. Not a deck I expected to be playing for this national season, but one that I've had a ton of fun with over the past month, playing, learning, refining, working with others on the deck list to get it to where we want it to be super streamlined, and I'm putting it out there. I think currently the most refined version of Dromai that I think I've seen and have experienced playing. So been super happy with this deck list. I think it is great. I think it could have taken me further, potentially, but ultimately landing in the top 4. A few others took this to top 8s this past weekend as well. Nationals in New Zealand, a similar list in the hands of a good friend of Nick's, Sean from Canada, in the calling over in the US at Las Vegas, plus myself in top 4 of Nationals as well. Really interesting things about this deck that we're going to talk through. I think I've had a lot of fun with Dromai because of the kind of just the intricacies of not only building this deck and having a really refined list, but the games themselves are really interesting. The game plans, particularly into some of your key matchups like the Mirror, Lexi, Bravo, Icelander, are really interesting and fun and challenging, and had a great time sort of learning and refining these game plans. So bringing you all that in this deck tech, we're going to go through, the fundamentals of the deck, why this particular cards are being played, why we play time skippers. We're going to talk about time skippers and the power of that card, and a bunch of other cards and 80 cards as well. To talk through the deck list, I'm going to be bringing on current calling Singapore champion Nick Butcher, who did a ton of work on this deck list. We tested together for this event along with Dan Mackay, who also made top 8 at New Zealand Nationals with this list this past weekend, and others who had been working on this with Nick. I know out in Canada, Aaron and Michael, so shout out to those guys who have been putting in the work on this list as well. I'm going to go through all of that, talk through the fundamentals. Now, Nick has a few things to say. He's thought a lot about this deck, and he won't hold back as per usual, so we'll get into all that. Now, if you like what we do here at Arsenal Pass, make sure you go and drop us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Helps us a lot. And, drop a comment. Let us know what you think of this deck tech in particular. Do you agree with me? Do you think this is one of the most refined Dromai lists you might have seen so far? Would you play this at an event? And are you a Time Skippers fan? And do you believe in the Time Skippers? Definitely going to be talking about that card in this video. That said, let's get in and start to break down the fundamentals behind the core philosophy of this Dromai deck. Nick, first question, Dromai for Nationals in 2023. Bit of a surprise for some that yourself, you decided to play it. Obviously, I played it as well. So the question is, of course, why Dromai?
So I really like the fact that I can use my defense reacts to pitch and then actually get some kind of value out of that, because I really like a defensive playstyle decks right now. I think aggressive playstyle decks like Lexi Mirror matches just require too much variance, and your outcome is very predetermined. You can't really influence the game, whereas I thought Dromai was just that deck that really was able to control the game. You actually have a good mirror match, which is really important to me, and so that's why I really started to play it ever since around Birmingham calling.
Yeah, and I felt the same coming off the back of playing Calling Singapore, moving to a deck like Ultim. I really like the idea that you can use your power cards as resources, your defense reactions, your dragons, of course, your cards like Burn Them All, the late game cards. You can use these as resources. They're not blues in this case, they're reds in this case. Drives a powerful engine, and I think, board presence, attrition, these are things that I've started to really enjoy in Flesh, and Dromai has all those things, I think. So Dromai shows up pretty big at PT Baltimore, takes out, 2 of the top 4 slots ultimately, and puts up, a really good showing, ultimately just falling short of the event. Outside of that, Dromai has kind of struggled to live up to its reputation a little bit, and has been underwhelming, particularly in high-level events. So the question is, why do you think that is? Why has Dromai failed to kind of hit the heights that maybe we've seen?
So to me, I just felt that a lot of the elite level players who were trailblazers in a lot of the most successful decks, like Lexi or Oldham in the past, or Icelander playing Wounded Bull, just didn't have that player for Dromai. And so a lot of new people trying to go into Dromai were in Discord discussion groups. And a lot of the people obviously are just a little bit misinformed. Maybe their fundamentals of Flesh and Blood aren't top notch, which is all good, right? Like each their own. But I just think now that we've come up with a lot of new ideologies and techs, that I think the deck will explode from here on out.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the fact of, you talked about trailblazers and pioneers of certain deck archetypes and at the highest level. And we saw results for Baltimore. We saw the likes of Yuha and Mara put up top 4s in that event. And, I think where the decks and lists have evolved from there. I know when we sat down and looked at how we'd build Dromai for Nationals, there was a lot of things that we disagreed with, which we're about to get onto when it comes to card discussion, and maybe things that people had either missed or had gone through and looked at, but decided ultimately, for whatever reason, didn't fit into the ideology and fundamentals, which we believe do. So we're going to touch on those. So off the back of that, Nick, what do you think were some of the previous kind of misconceptions or things that have existed about Dromai, these kind of maybe issues that have arisen that have caused Dromai to not hit these heights that we just talked about? You know, the specific fundamentals that maybe people might have missed about Dromai.
Yeah, so my first concern was lack of cards with synergy. So just a little quick thing. So cards that don't really revolve around what the deck's aiming to do is the first thing. The second thing was inefficient Ash generation. So if you're just playing inefficient cards just in order to make Ash and then getting greedy in order to do that, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to just have as many Ash as possible without losing value. The third thing is playing too many cards with prerequisites, which is just cards that say you have to have played a red card to get go again. You need to be doing this, all this. It doesn't have go again on too many of your cards, and then you just have really clunky hands. The fourth one is bad tendencies, or say like terminologies in order to justify stuff, like saying a card is a finisher, like Snatch, or it is Ash positive as just a cop out to be playing like a not great card that blocks 2. I didn't want to do any of that. I cut those really quick. Another one is trading damage. People want to take damage in order to cast dragons, and then they just get popped and they just lose a lot of value, and then they get down so much life, where a lot of times I just want to be very patient and wait for my opportunities. And then the last one I just think is overhedging on defensive cards that are just not very good in general, right? Like sand cover.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of these, because when we both kind of were in the early stages, you had a move to Dromai before me, and then you were saying, you know, I'm interested in Dromai, and I said, yeah, I mean, I could potentially get on board. I started to also play some games, and one of the first things we talked about kind of seeing was like, the deck kind of to us was like, you need to do the thing. Like, you want every card in your deck to do the thing. You don't want auxiliary cards that either don't give you value, so just don't give you straight up value, or give you value in a very awkward way, and don't contribute to your main game plan, which is like deal damage, dominate the board, trade up on value. So there's particular cards that we felt like didn't do that, right? You know, you talked about a card like Sand Cover, which is like, Sand Cover isn't a 0/4. It's a 0/4 that takes away an Ash, which is like really precious. And the more Ash you sort of take away from your deck, the more you have to start to be, you know, making these kind of suboptimal plays to generate Ash, right? Like now I have to start pitching valuable reds to my Furnace just to make an Ash so that I can play a dragon later on. Now all of a sudden my dragon doesn't cost me an Ash and the one card I used pitch for it plus the dragon itself. It also cost me the other card I had to pitch earlier, which could have been 3 damage defended or 3 damage offered on offense, for instance. So now all of a sudden my dragon, I have to get 9 worth of damage to recoup from it. Things like that was kind of, I think one of the things that kind of stood out to us with Dromai early on in particular.
Yeah, for sure. And another cards that I didn't like at all were 2 block cards that weren't starter cards. So basically everything except Ravenous Rabble, because cards like Blaze Headlong, they just require something else. And so they just have bricky hands. And then cards like Snatch don't do anything to finish your game plan either. And if you wanted to play all these 2 block cards that attack for 4, you should just play Lexi, because they have the better on hits and they block for 3. I didn't see the point in that.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. What about some cards, you know, let's talk about some of these cards that we ultimately didn't play, but people are pretty high on. And I got to go to the first one, which is Lost in Thought, because Lost in Thought is kind of touted as maybe one of the kind of premier cards that Dromai has gained and kind of pushed it further along in the previous meta. And ultimately, obviously, we decided that we didn't want to play any Lost in Thought in our deck. So just talk a little bit about that.
Lost in Thought, yeah. The one time you get it off and you get their popper and you just attack with all your dragons, or you just get their starter card, or you get their blue, when you never have the luxury of having a full hand, then you give them a ponder token, and then if they have a good card in their arsenal just to blow you out, they draw a free card. Like, it just isn't going to be good. Like, I don't see how this card is at all useful. And if you have to pitch a red for it, you've just lost 2 cards. And you made it Ash, but as I said, being Ash positive is an excuse for a card being good. I can never see it being reasonable at all, especially against aggro decks when it blocks for 2. Never, ever. I just hate this card. I think it is awful. It is the one card I just think it is awful, and I do not understand how people think it's good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have quite the same strong sentiment. I know we played it a little bit. I definitely was playing it for quite a bit for a Bravo plan, specifically a Bravo plan, but ultimately found a different way to play into Bravo, which we'll talk about in matchups, and you can see from our sideboard guide. But the problem I have with it, like as you said, is that it's the kind of thing I pinpoint is it's not consistent. The expected return on Lost in Thought is never clear, I think, and you can never account for it. And I only really want one thing I really want with a deck like this is, first of all, its consistency, and this card is very one-dimensional, which kind of causes issues for me. It also doesn't develop my board, and yes, it may help potentially push damage in the late game, but that's not a given, and it's only in certain situations. And then meanwhile, I have to deal with a 2-block card that doesn't develop my game plan earlier on. So I just don't think you need this card. I don't think it does the job you want to do in Dromai. I don't think it fits. But I could see, situations where you do want to play this card for specific game plans. For instance, a potential Bravo plan where you do want to stack up multiple ways to take cards, draw poppers, have extra action points so you can push through big turns of damage. But if this card is play, hope to hit their resource card to deny them sort of around 7 to 8 damage, well, that's cost you 2 cards. And yes, you do need an Ash from it, so that is relevant, but you've cost you 2 cards and opportunity cost. And if you don't get that sort of 7-8 return on it, then you're going to be flat or down, plus not developing your game plan. So yeah, this is a card that I've kind of really struggled to understand why people continue to play it. But I can see reasons why for specific game plans, but the kind of overall of this card just being good, flat being good, I just don't really agree with.
Yeah, as with the smallest thing what you said, it's like, yeah, you are just relying on variance, looking at their hand and just random hand. Like, it's just variance card, and I don't want to have variance in my life.
Yeah, Thought sees this card as not. Any other cards that we want to touch on that you want to look at in terms of cards that you feel, we didn't play or fundamentally didn't like in testing for whatever reason?
Yeah, just like real quick, Toma Findle, big bait card. It's another one of those combo card block 2s. It's not a red card, so it's not a starter card. If you don't draw it with the blue, it's just pretty bad. And it's only really great with Chromite, and you have to play Mage Master Boots with it, which I don't want to play. Billowing Mirage, it's fine in a mirror match. It's fine when you have a lot of Ash, but I just don't think it's very good. And you only have so much space in your deck. I think it's kind of okay, but not that great.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, some of the cards that we did play. One thing I do want to say first is I think a lot of the decisions with the cards in our list, and we'll go through the core of the list plus the sideboard options and things like that. I think a lot of it is around, again, just going back to consistency, doing the thing. So either game plan A, develop the board, trade efficiently, damage, so either defensively or offensively, and B, ways that just net you Ash. Otherwise, not really interested in the card being in the deck, to be honest, was kind of the philosophy. And I think that gives you a really consistent shell that I think is what you want if you want to have a competitive deck that is consistent. We know how strong consistency is in Flesh and Blood.
For sure.
Let's talk about some of the, I guess, quote unquote fixes. The things that address some of the issues that you or kind of others have had with Dromai. And we've got to start with the key card of the deck. Skipping along to time skippers. Why play time skippers, Nick?
So, story time. All right, just small story. So shout out to Michael Jaska, the kid from Canada. He just came up, he was just talking about silent stilettos, and at the same time, I was just scrolling through cards, and I just saw time skippers, and I just said, oh my god, this fixes all of our problems. We wanted to play Crown of Dominion because we just wanted to make a bunch of Ash on the first turn, but it was too much of a sacrifice to get rid of Crown of Providence, and then I just saw this card, I'm like, oh my god, I'm just going to remove the text box, pitch 3 reds for Ash turn 1, and just pass my turn. It just gives you such a big advantage in the game. You don't have to draw a 6 power. You don't have to draw Sweeping Blow. Like one time at Nats, I drew Dust Up, Burn Them All, Chromite, and that just does nothing. And I just would go pitch them all for Ash, 3 Ash, pass turn. It's insane.
So just to be clear, time skippers, you're going first in matchups. That's primarily where you're playing time skippers, and you're immediately popping it on turn 0 to get you 3 Ash.
Yep, that's it. That's all I use it for.
Yep, and I think the criticism, I know people have said, and I know time skippers has come up before. It's not like people haven't, I guess, looked at every single card. I think people have said, oh, you get 3 Ash, so what? I think when you look at the deck fundamentally as Ash being the thing that drives you and you getting value, that Ash is worth a lot of value. When you're spending a card plus your Ash to develop a dragon, where does that Ash come from earlier in the game? Let's just say it comes from a card like Billowing Mirage. I think Billowing Mirage. Card like Sweeping Blow. A card like Sweeping Blow is 3 damage, go again, that nets you 2 Ash, right? But that costs you 2 cards. So that is pretty reasonable, actually. I'm on board Sweeping Blow. I think that card is good. I think you need it to generate the Ash. But as soon as you start to have to pitch an Ash to play, attack, for instance, or you have to pitch it to your furnace is the worst. Now you're really starting to trade down on the value of your ash. The value of a single ash in this game, and this is another reason I don't like Sandcover whatsoever, the value of the ash is so high, and if you can start just a 3 ash in the game, it allows you to start to just control the board. You can block out a little bit, you can develop only your key dragons, you can develop them when you want to, and then at some point, if you've got 2 or 3 ash up your sleeve, you can just slap down 0-cost dragons and be so far ahead, and now your opponent has to deal with those in whatever way, shape, or form they're going to. Obviously, you're not going to be doing it into popping decks, but into decks that have to attack it, have to draw the popper on the right turn. It's just so massive. So I completely agree that like that 3 ash at the start. Every game I went first, and I like just time skipped on turn 0. I just felt so far ahead. It was kind of crazy. And ultimately, the other thing is, what are you competing against in that leg slot? Like Snapdragon Scalers, Iron Rot legs, Mage Master Boots. Like the return that you get, you're getting an extra 2 ash. And people will argue, okay, the other thing you can do is you could play like a CNC on turn 0, or you could play like a blue Embermore Centipede pitching 2 reds or something, right? You get 2 ash off that. First of all, you have to draw those cards.
Not 3. It's not 3.
And it's not 3. That value of that extra ash, I think, outweighs any other leg piece, personally, from what I've experienced so far. And the consistency of always being able to get at least 2, but you play, 7 to 9 blues in your deck at any given time. So the consistency of getting 3 ashes is really, really high.
Yeah, and it's also just a small thing, even against things like Levia and Icelander, not letting them block and cycle is so good. It's underrated. That's a tiny thing, but
yeah, great shout. Yeah, the time skippers, I think, bringing that to the table and getting off Crown of Dominion and keeping your head slot, which is so important, because they draw a card off the gold is really good, but keeping your head slot, so being able to play Crown of Crown, which is like one of the best pieces of, obviously Furnace is nuts, it's your best equipment, but your Crown is your second best piece of equipment, and you get to keep that, so that is huge. And that means you don't have to play, Seeker's Mitts, so then to generate that ash on turn 0, so you can play your Wave of Reality, and I really like Wave of Reality. I think it's so important for stopping breakpoints in the early game against decks like Lexi and Briar, so even Ninja, big fan of that card as well.
Definitely.
All right, let's talk about some of the attack actions, specifically the red ones, Ravenous Rabble and Mirage Metamorph. Now, Mirage Metamorph, clean 3 of in the list that we played at Nationals. Why Mirage Metamorph? I think this card's insane. It's just 1 for 7.
Yeah, this is the reason I built this. I kind of sculpted the deck around this, is because it makes Ash and it's not inefficient. It is Raging Onslaught that is future investment in a Dromai, which is 3 attack, an extra action point, and pretty much whatever they use to attack into it. It is insane. Like, I don't know why this card wasn't played. I saw people at Osnats were using it. A lot of people have been in and off on it, but I just don't see how it's not a complete staple. It is the best attack.
And this card's insane in the mirror for clearing, key dragons like Necria.
I just think there's only a finite amount of poppers, so if they pop that and not my Yendurai or Uvia or something, or whatever, all power to you.
Yeah, I was super impressed with this card, and really happy that we ended up on 3 of this card. Ravenous Rabble, the only kind of, I guess, attack in here that is a 2-block. The only attack that is kind of more, it looks more of like the aggressive kind of style of Dromai, this Ravenous Rabble. Why play Ravenous Rabble?
0 for 4 starter, go again, no condition on it at all. That's it. Like, that's all you want from that's what you want. You want starters, you want dragons, you want to be able to make Ash. That's what you want to do. Let's
talk the last kind of piece of it, which is really maxing out. In the end, you played 6 of the 6 power blues, so Enigma Chimera and Embermore Centipede. I ended up playing a Warmonger's Diplomacy, which I wish I didn't play, to be honest. I wish I just played the 6 attacks. So what's so good about these?
It's mostly just because they're great in the mirror match. Like, blue's kind of interchangeable, but these ones are really nice because they are great into attacking Uvia and Necria, which is the most important thing in that matchup. It also means you can be greedy. If you say, yep, I'm just going to use all 3 of my Ash, go down to 0 and cast 3 dragons, and then you just have that backup of future turns being able to go Metamorph or be able to go attack for 6 off 2 reds once they're clearing. It's just very strong. And it's just one of those 6s that you really like arsenaling, because if you go first and you have 3 reds and a 6 power blue, I'm not disappointed to arsenal the blue 6 power. Like, I can still go pitch for Yendurai, pitch for Furnace, attack with the 6 from Arsenal. So that's pretty much the reason why I like them. It's just the best of all the choices you have.
Yeah, they really stood out for me over the weekend, and I kind of, through the week leading up, came around from like the 3 to the 4 to the 5, and then ultimately I think I had my time again and re-register. I registered all 6 of them.
Yeah, shout out to Aaron Chance. He got me on the enigmas when that was smart.
All right, here in front of us, we have the deck laid out. Now, this is not all the cards. We do have some true sideboard cards that we'll kind of go through with the equipment in a second. But basically what we've got here, Nick, on the left-hand side, we've got all our dragons. And I think first one I got to talk about is playing 3 Necria. Now, some lists of Dromai don't even play Necria. Necria, to me, is one of the most vital dragons. We talked about kind of core philosophy in this deck. Cards doing the thing, developing the board, trading efficiently for damage, and not being filler. And Necria builds that ash for you, it builds those resources for you. I think this dragon is kind of criminally underplayed. I think I've seen people 0 to 2 copies. I think my kind of takeaway now is any less than 3 copies just feels incorrect.
Amen.
All right. So we've got our 0-cost dragons at the top, of course. 3 Azraeli, 3 Chromai, just a given. 3 Yindarai, 3 Kyloria, 3 Miragai. We ended up on 2 Uvia. I could see a world where you play 3. I actually think in the mirror, 3 can be incorrect. 1 early actually often isn't the best. There's so many ways to kill it in decks, whereas you thin through decks late in the game, and the Uvia is at its best when you can make sure you get that return for it, or force your opponent to now have to kill the Uvia and have to leave other dragons on the table potentially. So kind of where I see the strength of Uvia. 3 Thermite, not only is Thermite obviously great against decks like Icelander, Kano, defense reactions, whatever, but also it's just got a big juicy behind. 4 toughness, right? 4 health is a lot to deal with.
Oh yeah, they're getting that and Miragai on the field at the same time. Just hard to deal with, man.
Yep, really hard to deal with. Or even a Yindarai, for instance. Dominia, Tomultai. We were kind of waffling on Dominia. Tomultai has a lot of great matchups. You know, where you can, for instance, Fi kind of or Lexi. You get that on turn 0, turn 1. Sorry, turn 1, turn 2. You can be in for a very easy match. It can really soften that matchup for you. Dominia also, I think Dominia late game can just provide so much value. You get to take that popper or take that key card to disrupt their turn while they're trying to kill your dragons, and ultimately can just kind of swing the game completely in your favor. Move through into the middle here. We've got, I guess, what I'm kind of calling like our value cards and kind of some of our engines. We've got the 6 defense reactions, Fate Foreseen, Sink Belows, and Ravenous Rebels. The 0 for 4s basically at the top here. And then we move through into our Rake the Embers. Rake the Embers, to me, honestly, I just still think this might be the best card in the deck. Like, it's kind of cracked in a lot of matchups. Some matchups, it's just kind of insane and so hard for your opponent to deal with. You land this early against, like, honestly, so many decks, Briar, Lexi, and obviously its role in the mirror is kind of so crucial. Icelander, you land this early, you know, it's so hard for them to deal with. You not only have the Arcane Barrier in that instance, which can be relevant, but you just have these go wide sort of things that can also eat poppers. You attack with these first, they eat poppers, they keep your dragons on the table. I don't know, Rake just to me is just kind of, in a lot of matchups, just kind of insane.
Oh yeah, especially time skippers. Just make the rest turn 1, and then all of a sudden, yeah, Rake cameras are really good.
Exactly, you can rake so freely. Sweep and Blow, we talked about that already for Ash Generation and go against starters. Sigil, same sort of thing, right? 0 for 3, that's a starter that's red, just same philosophy right there. And also helps you extend your game out by gaining that life, that crucial life. Moving to the right-hand side, we've got a lot of our attack actions and kind of, I guess, these beefier cards. You've got the Dust Ups, you know, that kind of ability to often make an Ash, or even the Ash Ring, of course. That 0 for 4 is just so valuable and continues to block 3. We talked about Mirage Metamorph in the 3 of. CNC, I think this is a card, Nick, like we kind of went back and forth on. We played, you know, we cut down on CNCs, ultimately went back up to this number of CNCs. Well, why? It helps you, again, still build Ash Generation, especially when you're going second. You know, you're not time skipping every single time. You're not going to always be going first. A lot of matchups, you don't want to go first. You know, 5, for instance, you want to be going second. Well, here's a card that can create you Ash on turn 0 and threaten their 5-card hand and really put them back. Also, while helping you get towards developing your board for later on. Burn Them All. This is the key one. A lot of people just slap in 3 Burn Them All in there. I think kind of our biggest takeaway early on was you really don't need that third Burn Them All. Burn Them All is a card that you want at a specific time in the game a lot of the time. Yes, it does block 3. Yes, it is a starter. But, you know, multiple Burn Them Alls, drawing multiple Burn Them Alls is quite bad and often quite redundant, right? So just free up that space for another card that can do a different job and isn't going to clunk up your hand.
Perfectly said.
And then our 2 E-Strikes, which we already talked about. We played 9 blues in total in kind of the, I guess, the quote-unquote main deck. Ultimately, the kind of decision, I guess, was this 1 Warmongers Diplomacy that I played. Nick ended up playing the 3 Enigma Chimeras. I think Dan, actually, in New Zealand, played 2 Warmongers Diplomacy. Maybe he's good in that. I don't know. Passing Mirage. I think this card is kind of undervalued a little bit. Like a turn 0 Passing Mirage can be one of the best things you can do in a lot of matchups as well. Force your opponent to either have to deal with it, so you soak up somewhere between 2 to 4 life, or you just get to keep it around and make a lot of value out of some of your dragons. All right, lastly for the deck is these cards that are kind of the true sideboard cards, the true role players that come in certain situations only for particular matchups. So let's go through these first. I mean, Nick, I know Remembrance is one that we settled on 3 Remembrance in the end. Do you think 3 Remembrance is just straight correct, or can people play 1 to 2 Remembrance potentially?
No, always 3. That's it. We went down to 2 3 is just the right number. You just need 3 in a mirror match. Like, it's just too important.
Yeah, my
And
take
against Bravo.
Yes, and against Bravo, depending on your plan, I would say that if you have maybe a potential A, I've seen other plans against Bravo, which would mean other cards being played in the deck, things like Lost in Thought, which, you know, if that's kind of route you want to go down, ultimately not where we want it to be. We didn't want to have that card in the deck for just one matchup. 3 Remembrance, I think, is absolutely key in the mirror. So if you're expecting mirrors, I think you need the 3 Remembrance, and then also that just doubles down for your plan against Bravo. So I don't see why you'd play any less at the moment unless you're expecting kind of the mirror to not really be there, and you maybe want to go with a different plan for Bravo. Flicker Trick, we already talked about Flicker Trick and the importance of this card and how good it could be in matchups like Lexi, you know, even Ninja, of course, but also relevant against the Runeblades even as well. At the moment on 1, I think you could go up to 2. And then lastly, when it comes to the cards that aren't actually in the deck, Time Snap, Oasis, Respite. Oasis, 2 of them ultimately, and we at times were at 3, but couldn't fit all 3 in. Great against Bravo and Icelander ultimately. Same with Time Snap Potion. Blue for Icelander, and then it's part of the Ghostly Touch in-game plan for Bravo. Which brings us on to Ghostly Touch, just a card for Bravo in this situation, and is kind of your in-game plan to eat up all those poppers and then swing a couple of times with Ghostly Touch, one through a time-skipped Passing Mirage, and the other through a time-snapped Passing Mirage is basically kind of the game plan there. And then Null and Gloves is your Arcane Barrier of choice that you can use. Means that you get to keep your Time Skippers or your Seeker's Leggings to generate that Ash against a deck like Icelander. And then, yeah, they basically have that. Time Skippers going second against most decks. First versus most decks. Seeker's Leggings second versus most decks. There are some situations where you play the Time Skippers solely, for instance, Bravo, and Seeker's Leggings solely, for instance, against Kano. So that's kind of that's the deck list, really. That's all the cards that kind of make it up. And
yep.
So, Nick, with all those kind of things said and done, and, you know, all the considerations of where Dromai has been, where it kind of is today, and where it could be, what do you think are the kind of like standouts, or the things that tie this kind of list together that that ultimately, a few of us played for Nationals, that brings it to being maybe the most, you know, I'm going to say most tuned Dromai list out there at the moment?
Big call, big call. I just think it's a well-oiled machine. Everything has purpose in your deck. There's no inconsistencies. Your worst hands maybe are when you draw 4 big dragons. That is very unlikely to happen. As you'll see from the sideboarding guide, it's in aggressive matchups, it's definitely not going to happen. But everything else just blocks for 3. That's all you want to do in this deck. It's patience. This deck takes a lot of patience. You don't want to get greedy at all, or you can slip and just fall behind super hard really quickly. It takes a lot of practice to play this deck. I played a lot of Oldhim, so I'm kind of used to, you know, playing very slow and just biding my time. But sometimes you'll win games with, I won a Lexi game at Nats with like 6 cards left in my deck because they just went Rain Raids as 3 of a kind, premeditate over and over again. I just be patient. My time comes. Your time comes.
Yep.
What do you think, Hayden?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that. I just think going back to the key philosophy of the deck build itself is like consistency. Every card has a job, and yeah, there's nothing in there that's just filler. There's nothing in the deck that isn't doing the primary game plan of developing the board, trading efficiently, damage defensively or offensively, or being a particular resource card. And that kind of is illustrated, I think, by the move to the 6 attack blues away from cards like Warmonger's Diplomacy, which ultimately do nothing in your deck and, you know, are really situational at best. You know, some of the cards that you'll see that are kind of sideboard options might have some of these situational advantages, right? Remembrance, Time Snap Potion, etc. But the rest, the kind of core that we'll go over, are really about just a tight kind of 60 in the first place.
Yeah, definitely.
When we talk matchups, Nick, I guess one of the key things people want to know is like, what matchups do you want to play with this particular version of Dromai? Is there anything that previously you wouldn't have wanted to match up into that you want to match up into, or is it very similar, just maybe more refined, and so your good matchups are better than they were before?
Yeah, I definitely want to cue the mirror match. Maybe before deck was mainstream and everyone plays time skippers, which they should now, but maybe now it's a bit worse of a mirror match and I don't want to play it if I go second. But everything else I'm happy with, I'm pretty sure. The only thing I don't want to play against is Fi. If I lose the dice roll. If they win the dice roll and get to go second, it's not fun. It's just not. If you can win the dice roll and pick second, I think you're actually quite happy. You do have E-Strike, you do have Miraging Metamorph and Ravels and stuff, so you're able to like get a bit of tempo on them. But outside of that, I think I'm happy queuing into anything else.
Yeah. I ended up playing Fi at Nationals on day 2, the one deck I wanted to avoid, but I luckily won the die roll. And you know, I think with the power cards, I think I played 3 dragons in that game, and 2 of them were Yenderais. and the other one was, I think, a Miragai or a Necria. Like, just got to pick and choose the dragons because we have cards like Mirage Metamorph, E-Strike, Ravenous Rabble, and just good defense reactions could just trade damage. So, yeah, I agree. I think, Bravo is one that's interesting. I think it really comes down to how the Bravo player decides to play and their kind of level of efficiency playing into Dromai, I think. That matchup can range from kind of, close to free or at least kind of easy to really, really difficult, depending on how the game goes. But yeah, looking at this 80 cards and the 80 cards that you played at Nationals, 79 cards, I guess, between the two of us and also, I know, Damakai, and I think Sean in Canada topping the calling played a very similar list as well. If you were to go in and change any of these cards or change the 80 cards, if you were to present this deck for Nationals this weekend, what changes would you make?
If there was a better card for E-Strike, I'd probably put it in. It's a great filler card, but if there was something more impactful, obviously E-Strike is just a flexible card. I just didn't have anything that I wanted over it. The only other thing I think I was playing 2 Flicker Tricks for majority of the testing time, and that card is very, very strong. And I think it's only better. I think it's better now than it was before. I think a lot of Lexis are steering away from things like Winter's Bite. I think maybe I'm wrong about that. But I think that card is still very strong, and if people aren't prepared for it, that card is a clean block on Heat Seekers and infecting shots and things like that.
Really good against decks like Briar and Fire as well. Obviously not too many because you can get, it's terrible on channel heroic turns, but you just have one, you can crown it or arsenal it. And I was flipping between 1 to 2 the week of. I ended up playing 1, I think, as well. Yeah, that was the same. But I think E-Strike is great. Like, it is honestly like the only kind of like true filler card in the deck, but also it's friggin' amazing in the mirror. It's so good in the mirror. And ultimately, it also gives you just damage advantage when you're playing into decks that are kind of bad matchups for you, like Fire, for instance. So, I'd happily cut E-Strike if I felt there were things that were better that I wanted to play, but you know what? I'm not cutting them for something like Lost in Thought, for instance. Like, I want this card to still be a 3-block. I want it to be red. I want it to be a potential starter or have the flexibility. The amount of times I went E-Strike, draw a card, like to kill a dragon in the mirror, or just E-Strike, draw a card to like finish a chain in damage matchups. A lot.
That's huge.
Thank you for joining us for this deck tech here on Arsenal Pass, and a massive thank you to Nick for all his hard work and coming on and giving us hot takes on the thoughts behind Dromai and some of the fundamentals. Very much appreciated. If you do like what we're doing here at Arsenal Pass, make sure you do drop us a like on this video, sub to the channel if you haven't already. It does help us out a ton, so much appreciated. Leave a comment, let us know what you think of this deck tech. Do you want to see more? What do you think of the Time Skippers Dromai? Deck you take to Nationals potentially? As well, if you want the full sideboard guide for this deck, you can check it out on the Arsenal Pass Patreon. That is all up there now for you. Until next time, see you in the next video.